15,000 years ago, somewhere in the forests of Central Asia or the Middle East, a wolf walked toward a human campfire. It did not attack. It sat down. What happened next? Over thousands of years, across dozens of species, on every inhabited continent on Earth, is one of the most consequential relationships in the history of life. And the reason it started is almost nothing like what most people believe. The standard story goes like this. Early humans captured wild animals, bred them selectively, and over generations produced tame versions useful for food, labor, and companionship. That story is wrong, or at least, it is radically incomplete. Because the more researchers study the origins of domestication, the more evidence accumulates that in the most important cases, dogs, possibly pigs, possibly cattle, the animals came to us first. They domesticated themselves. What drives a wild animal toward a human settlement? Food. The first human settlements produced waste. Enormous quantities of it by the standards of the natural world, discarded bones, food scraps, organic debris. For a scavenger, a human settlement was not a threat. It was a buffet. Wolves that were less afraid of humans, that had, through natural variation, a slightly lower flight response, a slightly higher tolerance for the smell and sound of people, had access to more food. They were better fed. They survived at higher rates. They reproduced more successfully. Over generations, without any human intervention, the wolf population around human settlements began to self-select for reduced fear of humans. That is the beginning of the dog, not a human decision, a wolf decision. The strongest evidence for this theory comes from an experiment that began in 1959 in Siberia. Soviet geneticist Dmitri Belyaev began selectively breeding silver foxes, not for appearance, not for size, but for a single behavioral trait, tolerance of humans. In each generation, Belyaev selected only the foxes that showed the least fear and aggression toward people. He bred them together. Then he did it again and again. Within 10 generations, the foxes were showing behavioral changes. They were approaching humans voluntarily. Within 20 generations, they were seeking human contact actively. Within 40 generations, they were behaviorally indistinguishable from domestic dogs. They wagged their tails. They whimpered when humans left. They licked faces. But here is the part that stunned the scientific world. The behavioral changes came with physical changes nobody had selected for. The foxes developed floppy ears, curly tails, spotted coats, shorter snouts. Their stress hormone levels dropped dramatically. Belyaev called this syndrome domestication syndrome. Selection for tameness alone produced an entire suite of physical and behavioral changes as a package. Those same physical traits, floppy ears, shorter snouts, spotted coats, reduced stress hormones, appear in virtually every domesticated animal species on Earth. Why does selection for tameness produce physical changes? The answer involves a specific population of embryonic cells called neural crest cells. Neural crest cells migrate through the developing embryo early in gestation, forming a huge range of structures, including adrenal glands, which produce the stress hormone cortisol, pigmentation cells, cartilage in the ears and face, and parts of the skull and jaw. Researcher Adam Wilkins at Harvard University proposed in 2014 that selecting for reduced fear, reduced stress response, directly affects neural crest cell migration. Because neural crest cells contribute to so many different structures simultaneously, reducing the stress response produces cascading physical changes across the entire body as a side effect. Floppy ears are not cute accidents. They are the direct physical consequence of selecting for a calmer stress response. Every domesticated animal is, in a precise biological sense, a less stressed version of its wild ancestor. Dogs were almost certainly the first domesticated animal. The genetic evidence suggests this happened somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, well before agriculture, well before permanent settlements. This is a crucial detail. For most of the 20th century, scientists assumed domestication was an agricultural invention. Farming produced settlements. Settlements produced surplus food. Surplus food made it practical to keep animals. But dogs predate farming by at least 5,000 years, possibly by 25,000 years. Our ancestors were domesticating animals while they were still nomadic hunter-gatherers, which means domestication was not a byproduct of agriculture. It may have been one of the things that made agriculture possible. A dog that alerts to predators at night allows its human companions to sleep more soundly. A dog that tracks wounded prey increases hunting success rates. A dog that helps manage livestock, once livestock existed, dramatically increases the efficiency of a herding operation. The wolf that walked toward the campfire 15,000 years ago may have changed the trajectory of human civilization. After dogs, the story of domestication gets more complicated and more surprising. Pigs appear to have been domesticated independently in at least two separate locations, the Near East and China, roughly 9,000 years ago. Genetic analysis published in 2015 by researcher Gregor Larson at Oxford University found that domestic pigs in Europe carry genetic signatures from both independent domestication events, suggesting that as farmers moved across Europe, their domestic pigs interbred with local wild boar populations. Domestication was not a one-time event. It was an ongoing, dynamic process, more like a conversation between species than a single human decision. Cattle were domesticated approximately 10,000 years ago from the wild aurochs, a species that stood nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder and weighed up to 1,000 kilograms. Modern genetic analysis suggests all domestic cattle on Earth descend from a founding population of as few as 80 individual aurochs domesticated in the Near East. 80 animals, every cow, every bull, every dairy herd on the planet, descended from 80 individuals selected from a species that could kill a human with one swing of its horns. Horses were domesticated much later, approximately 5,500 years ago on the steppes of Central Asia, in what is now Kazakhstan. The site is called Butai. Archaeologist Sandra Olson identified residue of mare's milk in ceramic vessels at Butai, suggesting horses were being kept and milked before they were ridden. The domestication of the horse did not just give humans transportation. It gave humans strategic military advantage, so overwhelming that horse-riding cultures expanded across Eurasia within centuries of the horse's domestication. The Indo-European language family, the ancestor of English, Spanish, French, German, Russian, Hindi, Persian, and dozens of other languages, spread across Eurasia at approximately the same time as horse domestication. Many linguists and geneticists now believe the two events are directly connected. The horse may have spread not just itself, but the language group that came with it. Here is the part of the domestication story that most history books never reach. Domestication changed the animals, but it also changed us. The same evolutionary pressures that produced calmer, more social animals may have been operating on human populations simultaneously. Anthropologist Brian Hare at Duke University has proposed that Homo sapiens may itself be a self-domesticated species. Compared to our closest relatives, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and living great apes, modern humans show a striking cluster of traits that mirror domestication syndrome. We have smaller faces and teeth than our ancestors. We have lower levels of reactive aggression than other primates. We have higher baseline tolerance for strangers. We show more juvenile features into adulthood, a phenomenon called neoteny, including reduced brow ridges and rounder skulls. These are not random evolutionary changes. They are the same suite of changes seen in every domesticated species. Brian Hare's hypothesis is that over the last 300,000 years, human groups that were more tolerant of strangers, that had lower aggressive responses to unfamiliar individuals, were more successful at building alliances, trading networks, and cooperative communities. They reproduced more successfully. Their traits spread. We selected ourselves for tameness. The same process that turned wolves into dogs may have turned our ancestors into us. The wolf that walked toward the campfire 15,000 years ago did not know what it was starting. It was hungry. It smelled food. It overcame fear. And in doing so, it triggered a chain of biological and cultural events that produced every farm animal, every working animal, every pet on Earth, that produced agriculture, civilization, and horse-mounted empires, that may have shaped the very cognitive architecture of the human species. The dog is not a product of human intelligence. The dog is a product of a wolf's hunger. And every domesticated thing that followed, the cattle, the horses, the pigs, the sheep, followed the trail that one animal blazed by simply being less afraid. Here is the thought that should follow you out of this. We did not domesticate the wolf. The wolf domesticated itself, and in doing so, may have domesticated us. Every time you look at a dog, you are not looking at a human achievement. You are looking at the animal that looked at us first and decided we were worth the risk.